So, you want to start a podcast, but you don't know where to start. Well, in today's video, I'll be sharing with you guys some of my tips and a few of my secrets of what I have learned of doing 2 seasons of my podcast. Now, if you're new, you wouldn't know this, but I have my own podcast, and it is called Blooming Roses, and it is where we share stories of growth while blooming in adversity. On my podcast, I interview different guests who have not only impacted my life, but have inspired the community around them. So I talk to different guests from all over in different stages of life, and they share their advice and words of encouragement or funny stories, and you get to know these different people from all over. I started this podcast the summer of 2020, and it blew up to something I never thought it would be, and the guests that I've been able to have in the podcast have been incredible. It ran for an amazing first season last year and ended in February. And this week, it just started up again for season 2, which I'm so excited about because the guests for season 2 are even more amazing, and people have been trying to guess who the guests are because I don't share who they are in advance. So it's been pretty exciting to see people guessing and trying to figure out who's on the podcast. So if you want to go and check out the podcast, I'll leave it in the description box below. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and other streaming platforms. The podcast also has an Instagram where you can get a lot of news alerts, and that is on Blooming Roses Podcast on Instagram. So with being the host and producer of this podcast for almost a year now, I have learned a lot of tips and secrets, and I've learned a lot, honestly. I've learned a lot from creating this podcast, and I know there have been some of you guys who've been asking me because you guys have wanted to start a podcast. So I'll be sharing some of my knowledge with you guys, and also a big secret that I have that has helped me a lot. First things first, people often want to know about equipment. And let me just say, start with what you have. You don't have to go out and buy all this crazy equipment. Start with what you have. If all you have right now is just your iPhone and the recording device on there, that's great. If all you can do is edit on your phone or edit on your iPad or something like that, that's great. You gotta start somewhere. The microphone that I started out with was this little microphone. I don't even know where it is. I think it's in the closet, but it's this little microphone that, it did the job, and it wasn't great, but it did the job, and it was a microphone I was gifted to. I was given. Because I forgot to mention this in the beginning, but before I started my own podcast, I was a contributor on a different podcast called Unmistakably Star Wars. There are tons of episodes still on that podcast, so I'll link it below so you guys can go and check it out. But there were a couple episodes I was featured on, and they gifted me that microphone. And it did the job. It did the job for what I needed to do at that time. But my main thing of being a part of that podcast was writing articles or just interacting. As I started to expand and gain more knowledge about podcasting, that's when I decided that it was time to invest in an actual good microphone. So I use what is called a Blue Yeti, and it's a very good microphone. It picks up a lot of sound. This is something that a lot of YouTubers use. You'll see it in a lot of their videos. And this one, the quality is just incredible. I've had problems with my gear where if I only use my AirPods, or if I don't use a microphone, or if I use the microphone I had before, I always had weird feedback, you can hear static in that sound. So once I upgraded and got this Blue Yeti, it made life so much easier, and the sound quality is incredible. Now for editing software, there's a lot of softwares out there to edit with. But for me personally, what I'm currently using, I will probably change in the future, but it's what works for me right now, is I use this program called Audacity. It is free. I have Windows, I don't have a Mac, but it is free and you can record into it and then you can edit it right there. That has helped a lot in the past. Lately I've been having some tech issues with that, but so I've been doing alternate stuff where I take the audio recording and I put it into the editing software that I use for my videos, which is Sony Vegas Movie Studio, Sony Vegas Movie Maker. Again, it's what works best for me. I know there's better options out there, but for me right now, it's what works best for me. And you know, everyone is at different levels and has different equipment, and it's honestly what works best for that person. So equipment wise and editing software wise, it's what's best for you and what's easiest for you. The way that I publish my videos is I actually do it through Anchor, which is a very easy way. This video is not sponsored by Anchor. My podcasts are sponsored by Anchor, but this video is not sponsored by Anchor. But I've just found that it's easier to have a host site produce and put out your episodes. That way it can go to all these different platforms. It's a lot easier because for me, having to go individually into Spotify or iTunes or anything like that and have to put out each thing individually, I don't have time for that. I really don't. So having Anchor do all the work for me is just a whole lot easier. You can also record and edit on Anchor as well for those who need that option. I don't use that, but I've heard that works for some people. So those are all the technicalities of starting a podcast, but I wanted to answer those first because those are always like the most asked questions I get. But really when it comes down to podcasting is, why do you want to start a podcast? What is your goal? Who are you trying to reach? What do you want to talk about? First, you have to think of things like that. And then you have to think of, do I want to do all this by myself? Do I want to interview people? Do I want to have another host with me? There's a lot of different areas to think about. You want to think about if it's a hobby, if you just want to like upload every so often and have fun with that, or if you want this to lead somewhere and potentially be a career opportunity. And that's when it comes to being consistent in what you're doing and everything like that. For me, I knew I wanted to be the only host. I wanted to be the only host and producer, but I wanted to feature other people on the podcast, where if there were times where I just wanted to talk and that was it, then I would do that. But I knew I would want to have other people featured. So the program that I use to interview different guests is actually Zoom. Again, not sponsored, but Zoom has made it easier for me. Yeah, sometimes there's real technical difficulties, but I have really found to like Zoom because you can put this certain setting in the settings of Zoom where it'll take the audio, instead of having it be one track of audio, it'll split into two, where it's that person and then the other track is you talking, which makes it easier for editing. But at the moment, that is what I found works best for the purpose of my podcast. Yes, again, there are other options out there that have been recommended to me, but I like what I'm using right now. So maybe it'll change one day, maybe it won't. I don't know. But right now, Zoom is what works best for me for doing my podcast. A lot of my knowledge of what I've shared with you guys is not only from my experience of doing it, but it's also been reaching out to a few mentors of mine. And one person in particular has given me so much information about podcasting and has answered every single question I have asked. And that would be Devin Kleffer. And he was actually the first guest on my podcast, so you guys can go listen to that. I don't remember what that episode is called, but it's the first episode on my podcast, so I'll link it below if you guys want to go check that out. But he was actually my teacher in high school, and he He's the co-founder of Unmistakably Star Wars. So he's had years of practice and trial and error of podcasting, and I've been able to learn from him. And if there was a way that you all could meet him and just pick his brain, there'd be a great opportunity for all of you. And honestly, I do have a way of how that's possible, and that is because he wrote a book. There are a lot of podcasting books out there, a lot of how-tos and everything like that. I don't like how-to books. I think they're very boring. I have to be interested in what I'm learning about, or interested in that person's writing for me to finish that book. There's a lot of podcasting books out there, honestly, but in my opinion, I think this is one of the better ones out there. It is called Be Heard, the Definitive Guide to Podcasting by Devin B. Kleffer. And pretty much all the things I mentioned to you, plus more, is in this book. And this gives you everything you need to know. It talks about everything you should be thinking about, or things that you didn't realize you needed to know or think about. And like literally, if I took everything that Devin has told me over the past few years, plus more, it's in this book. His writing style, I really like his writing style, because he shares a little bit about his life, he shares stories, but also he creates fun how-tos. I feel like this really is Devin in a book, because it has his sense of humor, along with clear instructions and examples in this. There are also pictures in here, so that's pretty cool. I like pictures, but it gives like good comparisons and the ability to thoroughly understand what's being explained about the equipment or the whys and the hows of podcasting. In my opinion, I think this is a fantastic book. I'm not just saying that because I know the author. That sounds biased, but I actually read this back when it was in the early drafts, so it's really cool to see like the final version of it in book form. And I wasn't so sure when I started reading it, because I'm like, I don't like how-to books. And then immediately I was sucked in, and I'm like, this is amazing. So the fact that I'm saying that, I literally have I have 2 how-to books, and it's for golf, and I don't even like reading those, to be completely honest. I like playing golf, but I don't like reading about golf. But anyways, I'm picky about my how-to books. So if you guys want to purchase this book, highly recommend that you purchase it. You can buy it on Amazon. I'll have the link below. No, Devin did not tell me to create this video. He doesn't even know I'm creating this video. I just told him I'd tell people about it, but he has no idea that I'm doing it like this. So, hey Devin, what's up? But this is honestly, like, it still gives me ideas and resources for my podcast, or the future of my podcast, if I want to take it to the next level, which is so helpful. I feel like this is a good start for anyone who wants to start a podcast. I feel like this video is a good start, but honestly, if you want encouragement, if you're asking like how or when should I start, just start. I was figuring out for a long time when I wanted to start my podcast, and then when the pandemic came, I was just like, let's just start playing around and see where this goes. And it led to what it is now, and it's just been incredible. So I mean, sometimes you just need to go for it and just have fun, and it's trial and error. Trust me, I've had so much trial and error and tech issues and screaming at the computer because I could not figure out what was going on technology-wise. So I mean, there's a lot of ups and downs and technology issues and things that you learn along the way, but I mean, that's part of growing. You gotta have those little rough spots to have a beautiful product. So with that said, I hope this gives you a little push in the right direction to start your own podcast, but also go purchase Be Heard, the Definitive Guide to Podcasting by Devin B. Kleffer, and check out my podcast, Blooming Roses. Season 2 just started, and I'm so excited for you guys to hear all these amazing guests. And I'll link all the links below. Blooming Roses is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and other streaming platforms. So with that said, guys, I'll see you guys next week. Bye!